everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Landon.
And I'm sure everybody recognizes our guest today, who almost now, at this point, needs no introduction. We have John Lundwall back with us. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, guys. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Landon. Great to be back.
Yeah, you are back.
I might as well just move in.
We may as well just, set up some kind of a studio together where we do research and put out content. So, no, it's been a really interesting week. And I think we'll tell our viewers about this. Last Friday, we dropped a episode, which I think most of you have seen. It was called Groundbreaking Research, Dismantles Book of Mormon Authenticity. And this is with our friend John Lundwall, who put forth some extremely interesting research and information about the early Americas, pre-Columbian, and the Book of Mormon. We thought, oh, this is really interesting. We thought we'd get some views, Landon, right? We were kind of like, this will be interesting. I wonder if people will like this. Well, why don't you tell us what happened, Landon?
Well, once we interviewed Dr. Lundwall, we ought to call him.
I'm sorry, Doctor. Yes.
Because some of the questioning of people, we want to make sure they understand that he does.
Rebecca, you can call me John. Landon, you call me Doctor.
Okay. Yes. He's our friend John, but he's an incredible scholar and a PhD, and we love him. So
that's right. So the ideas and the concepts that were shared in that video have just really taken off. We just came back from Sunstone. We just had a ton of people coming up to us saying how incredible the information was. We've got originally we got a lot of very positive comments from post-Mormon saying, I'd never heard anything like this. This was really exciting. And then we started getting, you guys suck, the Book of Mormon's true type of comments.
A lot of apologists, I think, found the video, which is good too, because we welcome all kinds of dialogue about any research, any thoughts. We welcome that. So that's kind of what this episode is going to be all about. And like Landon said, we did just go to Sunstone, and John came with us and got to meet a lot of people that had seen his video. They were asking all kinds of questions. I mean, it just is such an innovative way to think about things that people were really, really interested in. So we appreciate everybody that came up to talk to us. Just on the side, I'd like to say, if you did come up to talk to us, please send me a Facebook message, connect with us so that we don't lose that connection, because we really appreciated everybody that came up and shared their story and what Mormonish has meant to them, and also talked about specifically Dr. Lundwall's video too. So please don't let us lose that connection. We really appreciated meeting all of you. But the question we were asked most is, when is he coming back on again? So I said, Dr. John, I think we need to do something quick. So that's why we're putting this out fairly quickly, just to, as John said, sort of flesh out some of the concepts that we talked about in the first video, and maybe talk about some of the comments, both post-Mormon and also apologetic, that we got, so we can kind of understand the bigger picture of this research. And I will say, I think if you have not watched the first video, that maybe it would be good to watch that first before you watch this. I think maybe that might be something, just so you understand what we're talking about. But we are absolutely thrilled to dive a little deeper, even deeper still, into this amazing topic that is just creating ripples in the apologetic community and also in the post-Mormon community. So that being said, welcome, John. And I think he has some wonderful slides prepared again. Let's just dive right in.
Thank you. I have 5 theses that I talked about last time. We went over the first 2. I'm not going to do the next 3. So apparently we're doing another podcast, because I still have those to do. Tonight, I just thought we would go over some of the questions and comments. I had several people give me questions and comments yesterday at Sunstone. Thank you for inviting me, by the way. And that was a great experience. I met lots of people, and not only was it fun and informative, but most of all the people I met, that was great. So tonight I thought we would just go over some of these ideas, flesh out a few of the concepts that I was getting asked about, and answer a few questions. That's going to take a couple hours. I do apologize for the timing. Last episode was 2.5 hours.
John, don't forget, post-Mormons are used to watching Mormon stories. A good 6-hour episode, that's nothing to these guys. They are more than happy. They're like 2.5 hours. It's a breeze. So no, and we people who contacted us yesterday, they all said, oh no, not even too long. You have to go through the research, you have to understand it to get to what the nugget of the truth is here. So please do not worry about the time. We are in it to win it tonight. Take all the time you need.
All right. Well, I'll take some time, but let's again, you just ask questions as we go, and let's do this.
Great.
All right, just as a quick summary of what we talked about last time, here are really two different ways to conceive the world, two different cognitive envelopes, cosmovisions, that blend into each other over time. And so on the left, we have Isaiah there writing down the revelations of the Lord in a literate religion. And on the right, we have a Mayan priest who is dancing his religion consonant with celestial cycles and the sacred calendar. Well, there it is. Literate religion focuses on laws, doctrines, sermons, and is written as a history, whereas what I'm calling secondary oral religion, you don't write your religion, you dance it. It's orthopraxis. It's performed in rituals attached to the cosmology. In agricultural societies, almost all of this is agricultural based. The gods are connected to the agricultural cycle, the solar lunar cycle, which is connected to the agricultural cycle. And, we don't get sermons on the agricultural gods in the Bible, but please know they're agricultural gods. Baal is an agricultural god, a storm god, a war god. So they also serve political functions. But in Mesoamerica, you have this paradigm through every period of Nephite history, and it pervades everything. And whereas the Book of Mormon is a completely different kind of thinking, which is, as we talked about last time, utterly anachronistic. In order for the dancing religion to merge into the written religion, there has to be some processes that develop. We can track them through time. They take centuries, and the Book of Mormon assumes that these processes have happened not only since day one, but from the very beginning, from in the beginning, that this is an a priori assumption Joseph Smith has about the world and about all scripture and religion. And it's embedded in the text. And it makes it so that the Book of Mormon is, impossible to be a tight translation. So let's get into this. And
John, just
yeah.
before you go there, if you're a secondary oral culture, does that mean that you have no writing system, no pictographs, no?
Oh, thank you. So primary oral is no writing. And so this is confusing people. Primary orality is no writing whatsoever. Secondary orality is writing. The people are literate, but writing is mostly used for economic purposes. Less than 5% of the population is literate. It's the royal caste who is doing the writing. And the religious writings are completely ensconced in this oral noetic, in this oral thought world of dance, ritual, cosmology, agriculture. So that's an important point to make. The Mayan, for example, had writing. So they're literate, but they're not thinking in the same thought world that the priests who wrote the Bible are thinking in. It's a different thought world. They're not writing their religion, they're dancing it. And it turns out at 600 BCE, the Israelite priests were also dancing their religion. So we just forget these things, and we just assume that it's all literate and there's writing happening from the very beginning. So Maya Mesoamerica is I'm classifying as secondary orality. They have writing, but their primary mode of religion is in orthopraxy, ritual, cosmology attached to their agricultural cycle. That is a completely different worldview than what we get in the Bible and in the Book of Mormon. And tonight I'm going to show you how those transitions happen. So that'll kind of help flesh out what I've been talking about.
Okay. One other thing I was hoping you could clarify, because we kept getting comments on this where people kept saying the Book of Mormon didn't happen in Mesoamerica. So the fact that you're saying it happened in Mesoamerica, you're wrong. And I want to point out, you're not saying that the Book of Mormon happened in Mesoamerica. You're not saying it happened in North America. You're saying it didn't happen at all, basically. But can you explain a little bit about why we're talking Mesoamerica specifically?
Good question. The Mesoamerica is the only place where writing emerges, and the Book of Mormon Society is run by texts. So you have to have writing. There's no writing in South America. In fact, I mean, so there's always exceptions in history that the apologists will glom onto. There's only one empire, that is several city-states being run by a centralized government. There's only one empire I'm aware of that operated without writing, and that's the Inca Empire in South America, Peru. But they're 1300 to colonial contact. That's the age of that empire. But they did have a way to keep records. They were record keepers. They kept them in textiles and quipu knots. Mesoamerica is the only place where we get writing to emerge. And it emerges rather late. This was another question. Again, someone was arguing about the Olmec script. The earliest form of writing we get in the Americas is in Central America. There are some glyphs that have been found that are attributed to the Olmec, their Olmec culture, dated to about 900 BCE, but scholars are still arguing whether that is a writing system. By 650 BCE, we've got some more Olmec glyphs that scholars have said, well, this is a writing system. And then, Zapotec at 500 BCE and Mayan at 200 BCE. And so, in any case, writing in the other side of the world emerges 3,500 BCE. So you can see there's a 3,000 year difference where writing emerges. And so in the old world, you have numerous centuries of the evolution of writing embedded in society. And there's all kinds of changes that occur. Well, you don't have that in Central America or in the Americas. It's a late innovation. It's a late invention. And it's a logosyllabic script. That is, it's picture writing, but some of these symbols represent syllables. And in these picture writing scripts, there's all kinds of puns. There's all kinds of sound puns, visual puns, ritual puns. They could be writing something that says one thing, but they're punning on a ritual that they're performing, and translators have no way of knowing that. I mean, some of them can start putting these puns together when they start seeing the text being associated with pictures. Mayan writing is often associated with pictures, just like early Egyptian writing. You have a picture of the thing, and then the text that describes the picture. That's very true in Mesoamerica. So,
are you saying it's a meme? A picture with the text describing?
Yes. In some ways, I guess it could be called a meme. It's the text refers to a framework of thought, and that framework is not rooted in the text. It's rooted in their culture and their dances and their cosmovision and their political structure. And that's what you have to know in order to be able to interpret the text. And that's why interpreting these early writing systems is incredibly difficult because there's this whole thought world that lies behind them that has been lost. And so it's not just a matter of translating the text. It's regathering, the cultural context of it. Anyway, did I answer your question, Lynn?
Would those writing systems of the Olmec and the Mayans be considered secondary oral, or would they be literary, I guess?
Well, okay, so it's secondary orality is the thinking, but it's a text. They're literate. They're writing in a text. I mean, again, the word for writing in Mayan is synonymous for their word for painting. The scribe was a painter who painted the image of the divine, of the gods. So we think of a literate scribe writing words describing ideas, whereas the Mayan scribe was transferring the divine from the eternal into the temporal through paint and ritual, because the religious texts are being danced. The texts are just a footnote to the ritual cycle that's happening. So yeah, it's a little bit confusing, because I say this is the oral secondary world, and people think then that they're oral and not literate. Well, they're using writing, but that writing is in service to their dances, ritual, cosmology, agriculture. It's not in service to their laws, doctrines, sermons, histories. I mean, those things are implicit, but there's a big dividing line. So secondary orality has texts. Less than 5% of the population use those texts, and it takes, the best civilization to compare the Book of Mormon society to would be something like Rome. Rome had a alphabetic script. They were polytheistic. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here in a few slides. But only late Roman period, it's estimated that about 20% of the population in urbanized areas could read and write. Right? In the rural areas, you're still at less than 5% of the people who can read and write. And then after the fall of Rome, literacy rates are very difficult to track. So 20%, however, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a tipping point. At 20%, you have your entire political caste that is writing, and your merchant class that is writing. Your politics, your laws, your religion, your priestly class is literate, and your commerce is all literate. And so your civilization is being run by texts, and that kind of civilization is producing millions of texts. And we have tens of thousands of remnants, so most of it does get lost. Well, this is what we should be finding in Nephite society. One of the comments was, it all got lost after the battle at the very end. Only a small group of people were writing, and it was all destroyed by the Lamanites. Unfortunately, the Book of Mormon does not bear this paradigm out. We already went through many of the verses, but their politics, their commerce, and their religion were all being run by texts. It's textual from the very beginning. We're going to go over that in the next slide. And so it's going to produce hundreds of thousands, if not millions of texts as a result of that. And if 99% of that gets lost, we're still going to have thousands, tens of thousands of scraps written on pottery and stone and textile and clay. And so
even on buildings, we see that in Rome. Across the building, you see etched in stone writing.
One of the, when text emerges, it is primarily an extension of the power of the state. This is complicated because this is, history is a foreign land, and we're tourists, and we bring our Hawaiian t-shirts with us, and we forget the mindscape and landscape of the ancient world. But there is no separation between churches and state in the ancient world. Writing is an extension of the power of the state. So wherever the state wants to manifest its power, it produces writing. You see writing on the palaces, on the temples, on structures throughout the ancient world, both in Mesoamerica and in the old world, Near East, Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. The writing is everywhere. It's the billboard of the state. And so to say that we have, I mean, look, the apologists pick and choose. They pick and choose the facts that they want to try to get the Book of Mormon to fit. Someone made the comment that it's a small group of people who are literate. They're writing behind the scenes. It's not a huge civilization. They're still living in tents by Third Nephi. I mean, there's so many contradictions in this way of conceiving what the Book of Mormon world is. First off, if you, after 600 years, are still living in tents, you're not an agricultural society. That's a nomadic or semi-nomadic society, right? Well, we know the Book of Mormon is not a nomadic or semi-nomadic society. They have city-states and they have wars where tens of thousands of people are fighting each other. And this isn't the end of the period. This is Deering. This is Alma and Helaman, right? Well, if you have a battle where you have 10,000 people on each side, how are you feeding them, right? You've got to have a massive agricultural base. In order to have a massive agricultural base, you're not semi-nomadic. You're not living in tents. Yeah, you're planted in a city that has fields that is producing a ton of produce to feed thousands of people, because you're having a war with 5, 10, 20, 30,000 people, right? You've got to feed them. You got to clothe them. You got to arm them. There's got to be supply lines, right? This shows you the kind of society that you're dealing with. And all of that, the Book of Mormon tells us, is being run by text. The generals write each other. All the prophecies are kept in writing. The laws are kept in writing. The wars are managed and written about in writing. The history is kept in writing. This shows us that we're not dealing with 1 or 2% literate caste living in tents. We're dealing with a society that has at least up to 20% literacy rate, that is urbanized, agricultural, and literate. Well, that is, by the way, how basically all Protestants saw the ancient world after the Protestant Reformation. The oral tradition was completely lost by the Protestant Reformation, and biblical studies have actually been mired in a literate bias of history. And so even today, many biblical scholars, when reading the Bible, tend to overinflate literary patterns in ancient history, forgetting that a lot of these stories are coming out of oral tradition, and they treat the oral tradition as a sort of fuzzy literate one, or as a memorized literate one. An oral tradition is a literate story you tell around a campfire. No. The oral tradition is a completely different cosmovision that is danced and sung and chanted, attached to completely different metaphysics. And these are two different thought worlds.
And we actually see that in the Bible, in that the oldest writings of the Bible are Psalms, which are
Exactly.
songs.
Exactly.
Songs. Well, actually, most of the Psalms in the Bible, the book of Psalms, are ritual hymns. People would go to the temple and they would give the priest of the temple a payment, a bird, an ox, a sheep, and ask them for a blessing. And the Psalms is the blessing the priest gave the person in song form, in ritual form. They would sacrifice the animal. It didn't have to be an animal. It could have been grain, or, generally it's food, because they're feeding the priest. They're feeding the, right. It's a form of taxation. And so the priest then sings a ritual hymn as he does the sacrifice, and that's what gets recorded as our Psalms. But the earliest text we have, again, it's the wife of Moses, Book of Exodus, and it's a ritual hymn. So this world here, this dances, rituals, cosmology, I mean, that exists through the First Temple period, and we've forgotten it because it's been totally overwritten by not even the Second Temple period, in the thought world of the CEs, medieval Reformation Christianity. So when we peer back, we realize, you know what? Not even Nephi is operating in this world of laws, doctrines, sermons, and histories. First Nephi, he's not. That world isn't there yet. So it's it's merging, but it's very hard to make an argument that there is a set of brass plates that is a proto-Bible, which is what the Book of Mormon says. We'll go over that in the next slide. So it's extremely difficult to make that argument, in my view.
Okay.
Any other questions?
We might have some as we go.
Yeah, as we go. I'm sure we will. I just always think about the title of liberty. I mean, maybe that's the biggest anachronism in the entire Book of Mormon, right?
Well, so let's just look at that. Captain Moroni would have,
sorry.
Captain Moroni would have had writing. Well, first off, according to the Book of Mormon, it should be alphabetic writing. It should be alphabetic Semitic writing that he's writing, and he's planting on every tower in every city across the land. And so who's reading it? Well, all the governments of every city should be able to read it. All the merchants in every city should be able to read it. All the priests in every city should be able to read it. If it's an alphabetic script and all those people are reading it, the advantage of an alphabetic script is how much easier it is to teach, to learn. And not only that, but we kept getting, we have the word book used in the Book of Mormon. They're using books as opposed to scrolls. You should have a minimum of 20% of your population reading. Now, I'm just saying that based off the contours of history. Right? The apologists could say the Book of Mormon doesn't say that. Well, it implies it in the world it has created, in the backdrop of all the action that's happening in that narrative. All that has to be there for that action to happen. And so I'm just pointing that out, right? This is what I teach, and I'm just applying it to the Book of Mormon, saying this produces huge problems for the Book of Mormon.
Let's say there is an elite caste
Okay.
system. Only the highest top people can write, but they can write in this form that the Book of Mormon has come from, this historical literary style, not the oral style. Would that transfer to the people when they're being read to and when their government is being run? Would the mindset change because the top have that ability to write in that
Brilliant question, Landon. I've been trying to say this, and apparently I have just utterly failed. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
We are told that Ammon, for example, teaches the Lamanites out of the scriptures, out of the written text, right? All the prophecies are written in scripture, and that is what the people learn by. When King Benjamin gives his speech, right, in his tower, and all the people, come and set up their tents. There's their tents, right? And listen to his speech. He says that the words of his speech were written and distributed to all the people who couldn't make it, right? So his sermon, which is anachronistic, is being distributed by text to all the people. Well, so you could argue all the people aren't literate. There might be readers who are receiving the text of King Benjamin's speech. It's like a general conference report, and going out to every city. And then there's other gatherings where people gather and the readers are reciting it. But then, okay, so, but here's the thing. If your religion is entirely embedded in text, then the psychological impulse is to learn to read, to practice your religion. So when your religion is practiced in dance, in public rituals, people gather and they interact with the ritual and the dance. Very often you have dancing societies. Oral societies are dancing societies. And it turns out much of the population are part of some sort of clan that participates in the dance, right? So we would get the royal priest doing a dance, but we even have echoes of this being practiced by common people. They're imitating, the religion. If your religion is entirely embedded in text, which is what the Book of Mormon tells us, it's written down and distributed through reading the scriptures, then more and more people are going to learn to read and write in order to participate in the religious world. And if it's an alphabetic text, more and more people will be able to do it, because that is, you only have to learn a couple different dozen characters in order to learn the writing system. Mine has 800-900 characters, and very, with all these puns, and it's incredibly difficult to master and learn. So the short answer to your question is, if there were a small cast of priests writing, if your religion is textual, your population will bend towards the text. So again, we can look in the Middle Ages. Most people didn't read or write, but you still have, but here's what we have. You have the priestly class, political class, and merchant class that are literate in the Middle Ages. So you've got that sort of 20% baseline in urbanized areas. The illiterate do not read, but the chapels, cathedrals are filled with iconography of the texts. And then you do have readers. That's what the priests did, the Latin priests. They read the text, and you went to the worshiping space and you saw the text in statuary, stained glass window, art, textile. Okay. So that is how that society worked. And so, and what is the iconography? Well, it's all centered around monotheistic Jesus and the saints. So a lot of Virgin Mary in the Mary cult. So we should be finding similar echoes in Mesoamerica, in the archaeology of Mesoamerica. Yes.
So in the 1300s, even though the people can't read, they're going to the churches. They know the law. They know the scripture. They know the allegories. They know the parables. They know the literary. They're not dancing the religion.
That's
At
correct.
this point, they know the religion and the laws, even though they can't read. And we would have seen the same thing even with the caste system. The people would be thinking in that literary style. They'd know the laws, the prophecies, the things.
That is correct. That is correct. And then, yes, just as a point of reference, that transition takes a long time. When the Torah is written, 5th, 4th century BCE, Israelite priests are still dancing. There's a scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's dated to about 100 BCE, called the Songs of Sabbath Sacrifice. And it gives us a religious view of this Mayan priest here. It's a text that goes over the New Year's ritual. So at the New Year's, there's a 13-week cycle. So at every Sabbath, the priests gather and do a ritual dance. And what do? They are ritually dancing through the temple in heaven. They're performing a cosmic dance, dancing through the cosmos in a 13-week ritual cycle. That's the Dead Sea Scrolls. In Gnostic texts, in early CEs, we have the Acts of St. Thomas, the Acts of St. John, where we learn that the atonement, the grace of Christ from the cross, is performed in a dance. And then I may have my council and date wrong. If there's a good Catholic listening, I believe it's the Council of Toledo, 6th century CE, when the Catholic Church finally bans dancing at the altars. And they're not banning the social dance, where everyone's gathering, bringing a Jello salad and having, young
A
women's
golden
night.
green ball.
That's right. They're banning the liturgical dances that had been practiced. And by the 6th century, they're almost all gone. And this is just, we're getting rid of it permanently. And so it tells you that this way of practicing religion lasted well after the Torah, right? And during early Christianities. And so there's, but the Book of Mormon assumes that this evolution has already happened, that religion is entirely textual from day one. And this is anachronism. And thus the text itself, I mean, the whole text is anachronistic, as we talked about last time. Did that answer your question? That was a good question.
Yep.
Are we good?
We're good.
I think we're good. I think we can move on. This is fascinating.
All right. I just wanted to go over just how literate the cosmovision of the Book of Mormon is, and of Joseph Smith. He conceives of history through literacy entirely. And so here I have page 1 of the Book of Mormon, the very first page. Okay. First Nephi chapter 1, verses 8 through 17. Landon, do you want to read that for me?
Sure. And they came down and went forth upon the face of the earth, and the first came and stood before my father and gave unto him a book and bade him that he should read.
Let me just interrupt.
Okay.
This is Lehi's vision. He has a vision where God appears to him. And in this vision, God shows him what?
A book.
A book, right? Okay. So, and bade him read. Well, let's learn what he read.
And it came to pass that as he read, he was filled with the Spirit of the Lord. And he read, saying, Woe, woe unto Jerusalem, for I have seen thine abominations. Yea, and many things did my father read concerning Jerusalem, that it should be destroyed, and the inhabitants thereof. Many should perish by the sword, and many should be carried away captive into Babylon.
All right. So, written in this heavenly book are all the prophecies and all the things that are going to happen to Jerusalem. Lehi sees the future by reading a book. The cosmos is managed by a text. It's God's book. Of course, the book itself is anachronistic. The Codex isn't invented in Rome until after 600 BCE. I mean, the earliest Codex, maybe 5th century, but they're not being really used until the 3rd century BCE. So, at least that word should say scroll. Maybe we could say, well, maybe that's just a translator's error. But the fact is, God has all prophecy written in a text in a book. And that's what Lehi sees. And that's what spurs him to leave Jerusalem and start this whole narrative cycle by reading a heavenly book, a heavenly text. All right. Here is verses 16 and 17. And now I, Nephi, do not make a full account of the things which my father hath written. So Lehi reads a book, and he writes down all his visions and dreams. For he hath written many things which he saw in visions and dreams, and he hath also written many things which he prophesied, and spake unto his children, of which I shall not make a full account. But I shall make an account of my proceedings in my days. Behold, I make an abridgment of the record of my father upon plates, which I have made with mine own hands. Wherefore, after I have abridged the record of my father, then will I make an account of my own life. So here we learn that Lehi has not only read the heavenly book and sees past and future in a heavenly book, but he's writing everything down. He's writing his dreams down, his visions down, his prophecies down, his teachings to his children, everything that has happened. I mean, he's writing. How's he doing this? They're out in the wilderness, right? You need parchments or papyri scrolls, lots of ink, lots of, how's this happening? But the entire thing is being written, it's history making. He's keeping a history. they're not doing that at this period. So this is all anachronistic. Well, it gets worse because
he's even making his own books and abridging them. I mean,
that's correct.
Exactly.
Right. He's a librarian almost, or an editor.
That is correct.
I think people forget the infrastructure you would need to even have a pen in your hand and a parchment. You know what? That would be in place to create those things, right? There's a lot behind that
Rebecca,
to make parchment, to make a writing implement. You know, you just don't think about it. You take it for granted. Or like a steel sword, right? The entire infrastructure behind that to have that item in your hand. You got to think.
That is such a good point. If you're keeping at this point, day one, they're leaving Jerusalem and everything's being kept in a written record. You know, if people just think, oh, he's carrying a suitcase with a pad of paper and pen and he's just writing it down. No, first off, there is no paper. Everything's expensive. You're probably writing on parchment, which is animal skin, right? And the process of making an animal skin writable, it's a process. They have to have herds. They have to have time to skin the animals, tan the skins, dry the skins, turn them into writing surfaces. They have to make inks, and write them with styluses. I mean, you're right. There's this whole ecosystem of writing that has to exist in order for this to happen. And they have to do this while they're building a transoceanic ship, which also needs a huge ecosystem of technology and tools, and in order for you to create that, in order to get over to the Americas. And again, how many people are you dealing with? 2 families in Zoram, right? 20 people. You know, and the apologists say, well, they could have other slaves, or, you know, they don't want to mention slaves, but they could have other people with them. And, you know, it could be, once again, it could be 1,000 people. This is very doable.
And these are not, these people would have to be generalists. They do it all. They make the iron, they make the furnaces, they make the ship, they make the ink, they make the paper. That's a very general person, where these are more specialized high-tech skills at that time.
Again, a very good point, because writing derives from specialization. You know, I'm often asked, you know, do you go out and look at the rock imagery in Utah, and most of it's pretty rudimentary, stick figures, right? And I'm often asked, why is the art so rudimentary? Well, that's because the person carving that wears all the hats. He has to carve that, but he has to hunt, and he has to plant, he has to do social rituals, he has to trade, there's just no way. When you get really sophisticated art, it's because your civilization has developed specializations, and that's based off you have a lot of extra food, a lot of extra produce, and now you have enough where you can have an artist class, and all they do is art. And yet, you know, even these societies, they do make sophisticated art, but they tend to be portable. Their sophisticated art, you know, like the rock imagery societies, their sophisticated art is in tattoos or you know, ritual headdresses, right? Those are really sophisticated. But when you start getting incredible statuary and architecture, you've developed specialization. Writing is a specialization. It appears when you have a plethora of foodstuffs and a demographic, a population demographic, where you've got all the people growing the crops, all the people managing the village or city, and all the people performing the religious rituals who can learn to write, right? So it's total specialization. That's a very good point. So I don't know, where were we going with that?
It was another
I've
tangent.
lost myself.
They're amazing. That's right. Let's go back to the slide. That'll keep us on track. There's so many interesting tangents, and I know our viewers love every one.
Are we? Is this interesting? Are we? Am I doing okay?
John, you have no idea the feedback that we are getting on the information that you're putting out there. So please continue.
All right.
We are
Well,
a captive audience.
Let me just finish this. I call this slide Mormon Inception. So this is chapter 5, right? So chapter 1, Lehi reads a heavenly book, and that starts the entire journey. Well, chapter 5, Lehi says, look, we can't leave until we get what?
Plates.
A book.
Yeah.
So let's just read about this book that they have to get. So Landon, could you read those verses?
Sure. And it came to pass that he spake unto me, saying, Behold, I have dreamed a dream, in the which the Lord hath commanded me that thou and thy brethren shall return to Jerusalem. For behold, Laban hath the record of the Jews, and also a genealogy of my forefathers, and they are engraven upon plates of brass.
All right, then they go get the plates, and then we learn what's on the plates. Could you read the other block, text block?
And after they had given thanks unto the God of Israel, my father, Lehi took the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, and he did search them from the beginning. And he beheld that they did contain the 5 books of Moses.
Anachronism.
Oh, yep. Which gave an account of the creation of the world, and also of Adam and Eve, who were our first parents.
Anachronism.
And also a record of the Jews from the beginning, even down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. And also the prophecies of the holy prophets from the beginning, even down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, and also many prophecies which have been spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah.
Wow. Wow. So those brass plates are the Bible, all the way up until Jeremiah, all the way up until 600 BCE. It has the 5 books of Moses. That's a really nice trick. You know, when did those get conceived?
Yeah, those weren't put together till after the return from Babylon.
Total. This is Deutero-Isaiah, this passage. But it shows you again that there's a heavenly book that runs the cosmos, and the entire Israelite history has been kept in a book. They have to get the book in order to run their civilization, because they're going to model their civilization after the things they read in a book. And then they're going to write their own books, right? And so this idea that there's only a few people writing in the background, and that's why we don't find any of their writing, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to apply that. But turns out it gets even more, because this is Moses chapter 6 in the Pearl of Great Price. And we learn that book writing has occurred since the very first day, right? And so do you want to read that, Landon? This is about Adam and their children.
And then began these men to call upon the name of the Lord, and the Lord blessed them. And a book of remembrance was kept, in which was recorded in the language of Adam, for it was given unto as many as called upon God to write by the spirit of inspiration. And by them their children were taught to read and write, having a language which was pure and undefiled. Now this same priesthood which was in the beginning shall be in the end of the world also.
Well, what we have then is this template. The cosmos is run by God's book. Heaven is literate, right? Adam is given a book, and they read and write and learn to read and write. And by the way, as I read this text, the language of Adam in writing is what is called the priesthood, which is really interesting. But the creation is conceived in literacy. In order for Lehi and Nephi to start their journey, they need the brass plates, which is a book. Lehi is writing a book. Nephi turns all this into his own gold plates and writes his own book. And then we're told throughout the entire Book of Mormon text that there are massive records. Everything's being kept, which eventually get turned into the gold plates of Mormon, right? So it's a book within a book within a book. That's Mormon Inception. And you know, that is a very late, that does not exist in 600 BCE. Okay. So, anachronism. It starts with this massive anachronism. Well, we haven't even read one word of Deutero-Isaiah. And we're on page 1 and we're in a huge textual anachronism. So
I find it kind of ironic that it seems like the only person that doesn't need a book or the plates was actually Joseph Smith. He didn't need them to translate. Seems to be the only one.
That's correct. Right. You know, that's,
He did need a rock.
he
But
used
he
a rock
didn't need the book.
and
Yep.
a hat. Well, clearly he was citing texts, right? I mean, how much of the Book of
That's
Mormon is the Bible? 15, 18%. He's citing sermons, right? Grant Palmer showed that. So he's syncretizing different sources to produce the Book of Mormon. You know, in my view, the last frontier of Book of Mormon studies is figuring out how this text was put together. That excites me. I hope that we can gather a group of people and really dig into that, because I think it's doable. So far, what has been offered is single source options. It was copied from the View of the Hebrews or the Spalding manuscript. Well, we already know he's using multiple sources. He's using sermons and the Bible. And we already know some things to look for based off markers in the Book of Mormon text. So he's using multiple sources. So, you know, the apologists say, well, he didn't have multiple sources in his barn, but this is a very sterilized, incorrect view of Joseph Smith and of history. And as long as you keep it simplistic, sterile, and unattached to reality, sure enough, it works. All right, I'm going to transition real quick. I had some comments, and I just wanted to talk just real briefly about just a transition in thought here. I've got two people on the screen that I personally like a lot. Joseph Campbell on the left, Hugh Nibley on the right. I went to the Joseph Campbell Graduate School. They had his private letters and papers and books, his library archives. And it just was a pure joy for me to read the books Joseph Campbell was reading and read his handwritten annotations in his books. And so I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it turns out I spent a lot. I met Hugh Nibley almost every morning for a year. My undergrad was at BYU Provo, and for a year I had an honors class in the Mazer building, and I'd walk up the South Steps really early in the morning to get there. And I would pass almost daily during that time Hugh Nibley walking the other way. And he was always reading a book. And, you know, I recognized him, and most of our conversations were good morning. He was always polite. But, you know, I read the collected works of Hugh Nibley through the 90s and attended lectures and chatted with them a few times, and had that great experience. I bring these two guys up.
What year was that, John?
That's very early 90s.
Okay, I just wondered because
91.
I lived next door to Hugh Nibley, and I used to leave at the same time every morning with him to walk up those stairs that you described. And so we do kind of walk by side, but he was incredibly fit. He used to beat me up the stairs, and I was not unfit. So I know exactly that walk that you're talking about. That's so interesting.
Not only was he incredibly fit, but I don't know how he read and walked. He always had a book.
He always did. That's what I thought too.
All the kids
and
do
this would
that
have
now
been,
with the phone.
they all do that now. For me, this would have been probably 88. So probably a few years before you were there. But yeah, he was always walking up those stairs.
Yeah,
so that's great.
That's amazing. Well, I bring these two up for a simple point. By the end of my first year of graduate school, I had deconstructed Joseph Campbell. So Joseph Campbell has this monomyth theory. And Campbell's monomyth theory is that all myths derive from a single source, the psyche. Myths are autonomous structures of the psyche that, it's the hero with 1,000 faces. The myth represents a psychological process of individuation. And so it's the human experience unfolding in narrative form. And human beings are autonomous storytellers. This is how we create meaning in our lives, by creating stories. So, I read Campbell for years. I love reading Joseph Campbell. Even after deconstructing him, I still love reading Joseph Campbell. But what bothered me was the mono part of his monomyth theory. He writes in The Hero with 1,000 Faces, myth is psychology misread as biography, history, and cosmology. And the way I assessed it, I just disagree. I think myth is biography, history, cosmology. There are multiple threads that weave, and one of them is the psyche. So so when I was able to say, what Joseph Campbell was doing is he was creating a theory of everything. I'm going to create this theory that's going to explain all of ancient religion and all the ancient myths into one paradigm. And it's that which bothered me. There are multiple threads that weave together that unfolds history, and I don't think you can glum everything on to one thread. And the monomyth theory is very much a one thread theory. And when I was able to articulate that, literally, I was sitting in my desk with my books behind me, and when I one weekend I said, I just disagree with this theory of everything. I was able to articulate that. And then I turned around and I looked at all my books that I had, and I was just scanning them thinking, how many myth theorists have I read that write in their own monomyth theory? They've got their own platform and their own, their own way of reconstituting history. And it turns out they all did, right? Max Mueller, language, Pan-Babylonians, cosmology, Jane Ellen Harrison, rituals, Levi-Strauss, structuralism. These are all different theorists trying to interpret ancient mythologies using their own version of the monomyth theory. And that's when I realized they're all flawed. This is the intellectual milieu of the age. They're all doing this in some way. And then my eyes rested on my shelf of Hugh Nibley. And I literally said out loud, the mono-Mormon theory, because this is what Hugh Nibley did. Hugh Nibley he had a central idea. And that central idea is that there were priesthood keys from the very beginning, and a long line of resurrected beings that transferred the priesthood keys to the people on earth as they built temples, reenacted the rituals and the endowments. And this is, and then it filters out into other cultures. And so Nibley has the mono-Mormon theory. And generally, when I listen to apologists today, it's a version of the mono-Mormon theory. When someone like, I'm not ridiculing these guys. And by the way, I still enjoy reading Hugh Nibley. I understand where he's coming from, and he's written tons of great stuff. But when I hear someone like Muhlestein say, I believe the gospel, and therefore I take all that I learn and I filter it through the gospel. Well, what's he mean by the gospel? This is a version of the mono-Mormon theory where there are priesthood keys. It's all rooted in history, and we can reconstruct a religion through this lens. Well, both of these are deeply flawed, right? They're single thread theories that reconstitute history. And I had several people ask me how the alphabet created monotheism. And I just want to say, I'm not here to create a monomedium theory, right? The medium is the message, where everything comes from one thread, such as the information system you're reading or using. The printing press did not create the scientific revolution. It created the milieu in which the scientific revolution could arise. Right? But there are a lot of other things that were happening, right? The invention of the alphabetic script did not create monotheism. It created the milieu in which monotheism could arise. There were a lot of different threads that were interwoven with it. And so I'm just going to go into that because it turns out that that's going to kind of press out some of the ideas I presented in the first lecture. And then we're going to return to the Book of Mormon and show, sure enough, there's just the entire worldview is so anachronistic because in order for monotheism to be produced, all these threads were weaving together to produce them. And again, the Book of Mormon assumes this has already happened in 600 BCE, and it hasn't, right? It's just starting. And so this is a huge problem. So here is my template for how oral peoples pass down information. They observe the cosmos, they personify it. This creates polytheism. They create outsized narratives to recite the things they're seeing in nature. This creates sacred narrative, which is myth. They act those narratives out in many different mediums, dancing, chanting, rituals. This is ritual. And all this is done in a sacred place, which is the temenos, the sacred space. Well, while this is nice, you know, I freely admit my graphic here is called the oral imprinting press. And what I'm doing is I'm using a literate metaphor to describe an oral category. And already that's problematic. I admit my own metaphor here in what I'm describing is problematic. There are aspects of orality that we have permanently lost. And I'm using a literate metaphor to try to express it because I'm literate and I can't get out of that thought world. But I have gone back and tried to reconstitute certain ways ancient peoples thought. It's really strange. And so I just want to talk about those. When monotheism emerges from polytheism, every one of these systems of how we observe the cosmos, how we tell our narratives, how we do our rituals, where we do all this, all of those have transformations that happen to them. And it's those transformations that ultimately yield a different religious psychology. And so monotheism emerges. And so these are multiple threads that are weaving in history. And I just want to talk about a couple of them. Sacred place, the manifestation of the divine. To encounter the gods, one had to be in their presence. Their presence resided in a sacred place. The place of the god or gods was where humans observed divine manifestations and experienced numinous encounter. For numerous centuries, millennium really, humans experienced the divine by pilgrimage into divine presence. They had to go to a place. Now, we don't think that way. To us, the divine is revealed in a text, okay? For most of history, there was a place you had to go to. The place was where the God dwelt on earth. So to encounter the God, you had to go to the place. The place had its own presence, its own divine presence, and you had to go to the place. To this day, a faithful Muslim must, do the Hajj. They must pilgrimage to Mecca. They must go to the sacred place. In the Mayan cosmovision, the Mayan creation that we read in the Popol Vuh, the gods try to create human beings several times and they fail the first 3 times. And they finally end up succeeding in creating a proper human being, which is an intelligent human being who gives them sacrifices. So the gods are being fed, okay? And so we get this cycle where the gods, every time they try to create a human being, it's a world age. And so we get this series of mythological world ages where the gods are trying to create human beings. And they finally create a human being that is smart, can speak, and will give them sacrifices. So we'll feed the gods. And they're very happy, except there's a mistake. The human beings are too smart, right? They have God sight. They can see all the things the gods see. And they're like, well, we don't want that, right? We need a monopoly on God's sight. So they take that sight away from human beings. And that's what gives us who we are today. We're just a bunch of blind, feeble primates walking the earth, right? The human beings that live today. But the first human beings, according to this creation narrative, knew they lost the sight. And so they recreated the God sight. And they did that by creating a tool called the Ibal, which is the place to see. Right? They lost the sight of the gods, so they created a place to see. Well, the place to see is the sacred place where the God dwells. And so you create this sacred place where you now have a place where you observe the cosmos and you observe all the transformations that happen. And this is how you're keeping your agricultural cycle. Okay. Sure enough, when Venus appeared on the western horizon in the north as an evening star, that was their rain season. That star brought the rains. So they watched for that star. That star was a god. And when that star appeared, it had a pair, the morning star, which was Venus in the morning. They represented these two positions of the planet as divine gods. And these become, in some way, the hero twins in their creation cycle who take heads. And so you now get the agricultural cycle, the cosmological cycle, the mythological cycle, all taking place in the place to see. But it takes place in the place to see. You have to be there. And one of the first things the Mayan priests, they write their Popol Vuh, their history of the Maya, after European contact. They're not writing it down because you don't write the sacred things of deity down, right? And so, but they lost their sacred place. That was taken away from them by European colonization. And so they complain about that and say, we no longer have our sacred place, so we will write the history. And they write it in, the European script. So, but the point here is, in order to worship, you need a sacred place. And this thinking dominated the world in the old world. It still dominates the world, right? Mecca, Jerusalem, right? They're still fighting over the sacred place.
Temple Square.
Right. Well, so we have a sacred text. And I want, so it's a very important point to make. When Lehi says, Nephi, go get the sacred text because we need to build a society and keep our own sacred text, that is anachronistic. The founding place of Jerusalem was the temple, the sacred place. And what Lehi would have asked Nephi to do was to get the idol of Yahweh in the Holy of Holies, because the idol was the emanation of the power of the divine in the sacred place. If I got that idol and I moved it to a different place, well, then my new place is cosmicized. This is where the God dwells. I've transferred the sacred place. But what they want is the sacred place, the connecting point between heaven and earth. Now, with that idol comes all the religion. So they already know the rituals, the songs and dances, right? And so you sing and dance with the idol in the sacred place, and that is how you're practicing religion. Well, that doesn't get written down. That's what you do. But to transfer the sacred to a new locale, Lehi would not be saying, Nephi, go get the brass plates. He'd be saying, Nephi, I need Yahweh, the spirit of Yahweh. Go get the idol, and we're going to build our own sacred place. Okay? We don't think that way. But that is the thought world of First Temple Judaism. They're writing in text, but they are still 2 feet in ritual and cosmology and the sacred place. You have to have a sacred. Again, these are agricultural societies. Adam is cursed in our Bible, Book of Genesis. He's cursed to till the soil, right, in sweat and tears. And that tells us that the creation story started in an agrarian society, right? It didn't start, the one that we have in Genesis started when people were tilling the soil. So it's not a hunter-gatherer society. It has to come, that story has to originate after 8,000 BCE when agriculture was domesticated, right? But in order to till the soil, you need a sacred place, because you are now put in a spot and your fields are around your sacred place, right? And so in order to know when to plant, you've got to be in that sacred place, watch the stars and the sun, how they move. That will transfer into the seasons. That will tell you when to plant in your sacred place. So it turns out the sacred place is connected to how you live, your agricultural side. You can't separate them. And so you need that sacred place, the temenos, the temple, to plant your crops in order to survive. So your deities are associated with all of that. Okay, are you following that? That's pretty straightforward, right?
Oh,
What
yeah.
happens?
Didn't you see me say, wow?
What
I was saying it very quietly.
What happens in 587 BCE?
Babylon
destroys
captivity, yeah.
the temple. It sacks Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So here's something else that happens with the sacred place. If you're an agriculturist society, eventually you're producing surplus food. And this slowly develops into larger villages until you get city-states, urbanization. And that's where our first writing appears, when we start getting urbanized, complex, social structures, thousands of people living in a city-state. Well, if you got thousands of people living in a city-state where you do need writing to manage that, this is your temple is not just where the priest communes with the god and watches the agricultural cycle and maintains the agricultural cycle. Your temple is also your political throne. It's where the king sits. Again, there's no separation between church and state. So your political power is rooted also right next to your sacred place. And sometimes it's the same thing. In Egypt and in Mesopotamia, you could not build a city before you built a temple. You cosmicized the land first. You put that idol on the altar and said, aha, our gods live here. And then you build the throne next to it. And that's where the king sits and administers the population. Religion and politics are deeply intertwined. So when the Jerusalem is sacked, two things happen. The religious caste is destroyed and the political caste is destroyed. They're killed, right? Your king and your priest are gone. The people, hundreds of thousands are killed, and the rest are exported out as slaves. And the destruction of the temple was also the destruction of the political, economic, social, and religious order. Torah was a way for a politically dispossessed people to reorganize these structures, but Torah had profound consequences for those structures. Transformations of the social and religious way took centuries to congeal into new cultural patterns. The Book of Mormon assumes these transformations have already occurred before the destruction of the temple. All right, it is probable that the Jews that are exiled turn to a new form of religion, textual religion, as a way to reorganize their political power. You don't have a place, you don't have a throne. The king, which is hereditary, his family's dead. That's also the seat of your God. The God is the seat of your political power. When you don't have any of that, how are you going to reorganize the people? Right? It's not just religion, it's the state that you're trying to reorganize. Well, either you go back and you rebuild all those structures, but during exile, it appears that some people had the brilliant idea, what if we make this entire formation portable, right? If we turn our religion to a text, first off, in order to do that, what do you have to have? You have to have a text, right? So sure enough, you have to have literacy. You if we turn our religion to a text, then the people who write and read the text are in charge. They hold the power. And that becomes your new political organization. All right. And it turns out if you're going to consolidate that power on a text as opposed to your agricultural cycles, and remember, every aspect of an agricultural cycle, the rain has its own deity, the sun has its own deity, the time to plant has its own deity, the time to harvest has its own. You personify all these functions and you perform these rituals with the different deities. This is how it all emerged. Well, when you get rid of all that, you say, well, you know, we're planting other people's fields as slaves. We don't care about that anymore. How are we going to reorganize ourselves? Well, let's write a text where now, wherever we go, the sacred place is transformed from the temple and the throne to now a text, which means the sacred place eventually resides in the individual reading the text. That is a radical different form of religiosity. And that becomes Christianity. The sacred place is the temple of the individual. That thought takes centuries to evolve in order for that to happen. And it happens through this process of turning the political and the religious into a text in order a way to reorganize the people. And what that does is it requires literacy for your religion. They're still dancing, but the impetus now is in reading and writing. And the people in charge, they're the Sanhedrin, they're the literate scribes, they're the Pharisees, they're the literate scribes that run the people through texts. This is a radically new idea, and it takes centuries for that to develop after the writing of the Torah. Okay, so the Book of Mormon just assumes this has already happened. When we read the sermons in the Book of Mormon, it is 19th century Christology because it's rooted in the individual as sacred place, right? It's the individual soul that repents, that has a soft heart, that turns to Jesus, who is redeemed through grace in the atonement. There's no discussion of the sacred place as temple. It's sacred place as individual. This is a long abstracted concept that emerges from Judaism into Christianity, into post-Reformation Protestant religion with infinite atonement. And this is what we get in the Book of Mormon.
So, John, I want to make sure, because this is really cool. I want to make sure you're basically saying that Israel, that Jerusalem is sacked by the Babylonians, the elite, the scribes, the writers are hauled off into Babylon. Jerusalem's basically ransacked, destroyed. The culture, the religion, the politics has all been destroyed. When Ezra comes back, or when they come back, or was it Nebuchadnezzar? Who was it to let him come back?
Cyrus.
Darius, yeah. So when he allows them to come back, they're going, we've got to recreate our culture, our scripture, our temple, but we can't do that. So we're going to make a book, the Torah, where we take all of our traditions, our culture, our temple traditions, and we put them into a book, and we create a book. And this is the law that we will follow. And this becomes the rabbinic period, the rabbinic laws. And that's why the Jewish culture now, the law is what Judaism is all about, is the law. It's not about the temple. It's not about God. It's about the law. And that's the problem Judaism solves, is the law. And the law is created with the Torah at the time they're returning from Babylon to recreate the culture for a people who had been dispersed.
Boom. Right.
That is
You nailed it, Landon. You nailed it.
Awesome.
And it's about the individual. That's the part that stood out to me. It is now the individual.
Yeah, the individual now connects through the law. And in Judaism, you don't really connect to God per se. You're more connected to the law. The law, obedience to the law is what connects you to God.
In the old world, the axis mundi that connected you to the divine was the sacred place, the temple, mediated through sacred ritual, the dances and the cosmology, which wed heaven and earth, which ran your political structure. In this new world, and again, takes centuries, the axis mundi is the individual that communes with the law through a written text to encounter the divine. Okay. And that process takes place really because the Jews became politically dispossessed. Now, why did Rome never evolve into monotheism? They were polytheistic, had an alphabetic script. What I'm showing is there's multiple threads that form monotheism, and we get monotheism emerging from two cultures, Judaism and Christianity. And of course, Christianity is an innovation of Judaism, but both those cultures are politically dispossessed cultures. They do not have a throne. And ultimately, I mean, the Jews rebuild their temple, but, you know, the Northern Kingdom was destroyed and never reorganized. The Southern Kingdom was wiped out. And at that point, they're like, we're going to do something different. We're going to put this into the law, into Torah, which is in writing, which is in a book. And now religion is textual, and slowly that changes everything. Everything you worship through a text. This is the world of the Book of Mormon. So, but
and the Torah is the Pentateuch, is the 5 books of Moses. That's why it was anachronistic when Lehi left with it, because it hasn't been put together.
It has not been put together. Has not been put together. Literally, there's still, you know, the apologist, because we have so little information, the apologists can say, oh no, they already had written it. But all the evidence we have is they're still dancing. They're still doing temple dance. Just read Margaret Barker's work where she reconstitute First Temple Judaism, and it's in a completely different thought world. It's the thought world that we've been talking about with the Maya. So in any case, what I'm just showing is it takes centuries of evolution and it's alphabetic script that allows then this kind of religiosity to percolate and to mold around monotheism.
Just one other question on monotheism, because I know apologists are going to go there. Akhenaten in Egypt, he made an attempt at monotheism, not long lasted, but he made an attempt. How does that play?
Sure enough. So there's a few forays into monotheism before 6th century Judaism. And probably the best well-known is Akhenaten, Amenhotep, Akhenaten. The Aten is become, once again, this theology appears to surround one creator God, the Aten, the sun, which is the organizing force that organizes absolutely everything. However, was it pure monotheism? It's actually not so simple. They still had divine spirits. Even when the Torah is written, there's a belief in angelology, right? The Zohar lists 10 different ranks of angels that help manage the cosmos. So you have Yahweh, a monotheistic God, and then ranks of angels that actually used to be the other gods in the old polytheistic systems, but they've been reduced to, divine subordinates that help run the cosmos. Well, the Aten may have had that same relationship with the other divine powers in that priesthood order. However, the Aten lasts one lifetime, right? That's Akhenaten. And furthermore, Akhenaten is physically deformed. And so he spent, being king, being pharaoh, in order to be a pharaoh, you had to perform your annual dances. This is literal. The said festival, the pharaoh had to do a cosmic dance around the great courtyard that represented the recreation of the world. In the pyramid texts, while we're at it, the pharaoh needs to know all the proper dances in the underworld in order to pass through the underworld. And there's a group of watchers who dance for him. So the entire ritual is being danced. And in order to run your cosmos, you have to dance it. And it turns out this is what we find in Mesoamerica. The Mayan priests, who are all royalty, are performing dances that are not only religious, but they're political. The royal elite, in fact, the earliest text we have of a dance in the Mayan world is Olmec. No, it's Mayan. Now I'm trying to remember the date. It's in the BCEs, but again, we learned that Mayan history is really short statements of place, sacred place, name, and event, right? And so I cannot actually remember the date. It's 200, 300, 400 BCE, where the king, the event that's being memorialized is the dance he did for the city. All right. He's doing the sacred dance that re-engenders the cosmos. It's a creation dance. And so in any case, I totally lost where I was going.
It doesn't matter. Wherever you go is amazing. So that's exactly it.
Well, I just, this thought world is nowhere in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon, all of religion has been transferred to the individual relationship with the divine through a text, which is sermonized, internalized, and put into a process of individual repentance with an individual relationship with the divine. That's not occurring. That's not even occurring during the writing of the Torah. I don't even think it's occurring in the early centuries of Christianity. So this is a long process.
But the Book of Mormon requires us to believe it's happened before they've even left Jerusalem.
We talk of Christ, we preach of Christ, we rejoice in Christ.
Right.
This is Second Nephi. This is 600 BCE when this has already happened.
And it doesn't exist. That thought process, that concept,
exist.
none of that exists.
There was something else I wanted to say there, but I can't remember.
It'll come back to you and we'll go back.
I just wanted to make the point that the political order is every much tied up in this process of polytheism and monotheism, of literacy and orality, than the religious order. They're the same thing. So that's a thread that's going to be woven into how history unfolds. And then I'm just going to, how are we doing on time? I haven't actually.
We are fine. We can go Mormon stories level if you want. This is amazing.
I just looked at the time. It's, oh my.
Unless you have to leave for dinner. If you have to leave for
No,
dinner,
I don't have to leave, but
I
really don't want to do this in under, I do want to do this in under 2 hours. So let me speed through this.
Let's keep going.
One of the main differences between the Mayan thought world, for example, and the thought world of the Book of Mormon is in its very notion of how the universe is made. This is so radically different than when I first started to encounter it. It took me a long time to wrap my mind around it because it's such a different way of thinking. Landon, could you read the text block for me?
Yeah. What differences in thinking and culture occur when the cosmos is imagined, not composed of pieces and parts, but of forces and influences? When creation is a vibration that causes material forms, one mimics the creation through song and dance. This scene, wed to analogical thinking, produces many cultural structures that to us seem bizarre.
All right. So look, we just have this cosmovision where the universe is made up of atoms and quarks, of pieces and parts, billiard balls, and there are forces, they hit each other and they merge and they destroy and create. But we have a very noun-based cosmology. Things are made of things, right? I mean, the universe is made of things. It appears they didn't think that way. The universe wasn't made of things were the illusion. The universe was made of forces, emanations, powers that came from the divine world, and they congealed into material things. But the universe itself was made of interacting forces. So if you want to interact with the divine, what do? Well, you certainly don't read a text. You engage by mimicking the force or the power or the influence that is happening. So they watch the stars rise and set, the sun rise and set through the entire year. Everything was movement. And this movement was a power. The Aztec called it tolot. It's the power that causes things to emerge. And you have to interact with that power in order to influence it. And so how do you interact with a force that moves? Well, then you move, you dance. Your dance is mimicking the force that moves. And so they literally are dancing their religion because that's how they see the universe. They see the universe as a dance. This is so separated from textual religion, but we find this again in the old world and in the new world, occupying a millennium of thought. Now, there's one other piece to this, and that is analogical thinking. The universe is composed of verbs, not nouns. And if there's any two things that look like each other, any two nouns that look like each other, they have the same shape, or they emerge at the same time, or they might even have the same color. They are related through the verbs, right? And so again, but if two things, again, astrological thinking, when that star rises on the horizon and that plant begins to grow, they connect them through analogical thought. That star is causing that plant to grow. Well, they're connected through the divine force or emanation the star is emitting. So really, the God isn't so much the star or the plant, it's the force that connects the two, that causes the plant to emerge, right? Again, trying to wrap your mind around it, but this is at the root of one of the most basic religious structures in the Americas, and that's human sacrifice. And I want to talk about that because human sacrifice exists pretty much through the entire Book of Mormon timeline. And it's part of their religious cosmovision. They dance a ritual and then sacrifice a victim to get the divine emanation from the divine world to keep this material world going. And they want to influence, they're feeding the gods so that the gods will feed them, right? Through this divine interaction.
Just before you go there, John, I want to say one thing, if you don't mind.
You bet.
This really ties in our book club. We read a book, and I believe it came out of Braiding Sweetgrass, which is actually by a Native American person. And they brought up exactly that thing that she mentioned, that in their language, a river was not a noun, a river was a verb because it was movement. It tied things, it moved things in nature, and it was a verb. And I thought, wow, how cool was that? And now I hear this, and it just brings it, wow, the Native Americans thinking and seeing it as a verb versus a noun.
Because I don't think that way. I've not been trained to think that way. I stumble on this all the time when I'm reading an ancient text. Every once in a while, I have to remind myself, how does the text read if the universe is made out of verbs instead of nouns, right? If these gods are verbs instead of nouns, and it changes the way you see it. And it's extremely difficult to do. So,
well, wouldn't you say we're locked in our literary construct? I mean, that's
yes,
something I took
are.
away from our field trip together that we talked
Yes.
about in the last video, that you said those of us that are here on the trip, you can't think like they think. There's no way you can make your mind do that. You can try to understand, you can think maybe around it, but you cannot get there because we're blocked by that literary construct. We accept the Book of Mormon as it is because it's a literary construct, just like we think. It makes perfect sense. So that's why this is just so fascinating. My brain is like on fire right now. I just love it.
Great. Excellent comment, Rebecca. Yeah. Epistemological wall between our thought world and theirs. But this thought world is in Mesoamerica. They're behind the epistemological wall. And yet I can read the Book of Mormon as if it was written in the it was written in the 1800s, but that's when it was written. That's when it was conceived.
Exactly.
The conception of it is that time frame, right? It cannot be a tight translation. All right, so here I'm just going to quickly go over a few motifs because I don't know. I won't care about the time. Here we have
Do not care. Please do
a
not care for our
stone
sake.
palette emerging from the Central Andes, 600 and 900 BC. I know this is not Mesoamerica or North America, but I'm just going to show you this motif through South, Central, and North America. Okay. This is early 600 and 900 BCE. We have at a place like Sechin Bajo beheading scenes as early as 1650 BCE. But here is a very common motif that we find in the Americas in different forms, in different variations, but it's called the sprouting head motif. This left image, you have this jaguar icon holding a decapitated head with floral vines, plant vines emerging from the center. They're linking the decapitated head with fertility. And we're going to talk about why they do that, because this is everywhere. This is the thought world of this world. Also in Peru, this is later, this is Nazca culture, we find a trophy head, which is, I mean, literally that's a head of a human being with a rope coming out of its skull, which they hung as a trophy. And that's Nazca culture between 100 BCE and 500 CE, where these heads are found. They found several heads and decapitated skeletons. So they know that they're ritually taking heads, and they're doing it for two purposes. Well, they're doing it for the fertility, and they're doing it for the political power. The sprouting head motif is their fertility. The trophy head is for the political power. But again, these are merged together. Here is, so this is late Chichen Itza. Here on the left, you have a Mayan warrior playing the ball game. And so interestingly enough, the ball game is completely rooted in a completely different thought world, this thought world. And almost every city has a ball court where the ball game was played. And the ball game in some way reenacts their creation story, which deals with the hero twins going through the underworld, getting beheaded, and bringing up the powers of fertility from the underworld into their agricultural cycle. And so you have this warrior, and do you see in his left hand what's below it?
Yeah.
A decapitated head.
A head.
He's got the decapitated head. He's in armor, and all sprouting out of him are these serpent heads. This is the sprouting head motif. This is the power of fertility. And what we're looking at again is a verb, not a noun. So this is the power of the divine unfolding through the ritual act of taking a head. And they're doing this in their ball court. And then in Chichen Itza, you have these walls of skulls that are, basically skull racks, but these are your trophy heads. These are the heads of your vanquished enemies that you take that bring power to your city. Well, it turns out the sprouting head motif and the trophy head are essentially doing the same thing. They're bringing cosmic power into the land, into the sacred place. The city is the sacred place. You have to go to do the ritual in the sacred place in order to encounter the divine. And in this thought world, an essential part of that ritual was to take a human sacrificial head. Okay. Well, guess what? I do this, and so I have to at least show your audience a few of my photos.
Yes, you do.
This is a pictograph in northeastern Utah. So this is late Fremont, between 1000 and 1300 CE. And that guy's a solar deity. And for 7 days a year, the light descends down on this rock face and perfectly fills his headdress. 3 days before summer solstice, 3 days after summer solstice. So the sun right there is filling this figure's headdress on the days of summer solstice. Interestingly enough, very hard to see. And for the first year we looked at this, I didn't even notice it. until I was there on spring equinox filming it, and it popped out as bright as day. But there is a little form there. Yeah, I don't know. Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yes.
There's a little lump beneath his left arm, right? That is the same thing.
Is that
Is
a head?
this.
He's holding a head.
He's holding a head.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
He's holding a head. And furthermore, the sun is taking his head. That's what's going on there with that head. And we know he's holding a head because here we have the same figure with the same headdress. He's holding a fringed staff, which is a rain staff. It's a fertility staff. There's your serpents coming out of the Mayan warrior. Okay. And look what's happening here. He's holding heads. There's that lump. This is a head. And this figure, I mean, these holes are bullet holes. The people are shooting them out. But those two holes there are not bullet holes. Those are carved in. Those are eyes in a head. And he's taking a head. So this is Fremont culture, 1000 to 1300 CE, well after the Book of Mormon times, but it's tied to the agricultural cycle. And they're growing maize up in northeastern Utah between 250 CE until they abandon the site at 1300 CE. But then we also find a scalp. This is what a proper scalp looks like. You've heard of scalping, right? Mm-hmm. Native Americans would take the top of the head, right? Just the hair in a scalp, but a proper scalp is defleshing the entire skull. And this scalp is the entire skull with hair and eyelids. And it's dated to late basket makers. So it's at the basket makers 1200 to 200 BCE. So that scalp is probably at the latter end of that period, 500 to 200 BCE. But it shows you that they're taking scalps in the BCEs, and it's got a leather loop coming out of the top of the scalp to hang. This is your fertility head, and this is your trophy head. Okay. And this is in the American Southwest. So this scalp was found in Arizona, dating into the BCEs. So you have this head taking going on I'm not going to get into the dating. It's going on for a very long time. We have human sacrifice in Central America that we can definitely pinpoint between 0 CE forwards. The Teotihuacan had child human sacrifice. The Mayans had child human sacrifice, and they had head taking. We get before that, probably human sacrifice found in bogs where sacrifices were thrown. In Olmec culture, going back to 650 BCE. In Peru, it goes back into the second millennium BCE. Our texts and our iconography in the Maya, you're looking at 200 BCE and forward, right? So we know this is going on in the Book of Mormon period, but it's going on because it's essential. And this is, this is what the Mayan knew that murder was wrong, but human sacrifice was moral. So that's hard to get your mind around, but it was a necessary constituent of running the cosmos. So why? Well, again, there's all kinds of relationships that we've forgotten. When maize was domesticated, and it was domesticated between 4 and 7,000 BCE, depending on which scholarly paper you read. When maize is domesticated, a religion is invented, right? Again, archaeologists speak only in material terms, and they speak of it as a foodstuff that's being passed around and a technology that's being traded. But in fact, it's a religion that is moving. It might be better to say when the religion of maize moved, the maize was the byproduct. So you had to practice the religion of maize in order to get the maize. Agriculture and religion were synonymous. Head taking and agriculture were synonymous. Why? Well, we're going to enter this different thought world. In the Pueblos, the American Southwest Pueblos, a name for a scalp meant seed being or rain being, the thing that was a seed or brought the rains. How would a head bring rains? In that previous pictograph, the figure is holding a head and a rain staff. The head is bringing the rains. In Mesoamerica, the heads brought the rains. Venus's evening star in the north started the rain cycle, and so Chalk, the rain god, is in every codex. He's seen holding a head and a knife, just like that pictograph, and he takes a head to bring and to cause the rains to come. Well, it turns out the head is an essential. The head is a verb, not a noun. So, two things about a head. This is analogical thinking in this thought world. The head contains all the divine functions of the cosmos, where you see, where you smell, where you hear, and where you speak. Your speech projects your will. So your speech is not only where you breathe in your nose, but it's where you project your will into the world. So all of that is contained in the head. All the divine functions, all the divine verbs are manifest in the head. Now, when a human is born, what happens? First thing that happens, the woman's water breaks. The birth is announced through the waters of human birth. They thought analogically, waters produce the head. The first thing that comes out of the womb is what? The head.
The head. Oh,
the
my
head.
goodness.
So the head contains all the divine functions. It's where the divine functions manifest, right? This is the divine realm right here on every person. And it is brought forth by waters, and it's the only thing that produces waters and tears. Okay? So in a lot of these head-taking motifs, there's a crying eye motif where you see in Native American cultures the lines coming out of the eyes. This is the divine substance of the divine force coming out into the material world through waters. And so literally, the head is brought forth by waters and it creates waters. So if I want to perform a rain ceremony to bring the waters of the cosmos to my fields, what am I going to do? I'm going to offer the gods a head, right? I take what is cosmologically synonymous, the divine the human collects the divine power in the head. I take that, I offer it to the gods in a ritual, and the thing that produces water and is produced by waters, in return, I will gain waters from the divine realm. And this is part of my rain ceremony. Well, clearly we don't think that way.
Clearly.
But why don't we think
Thank
that
goodness.
way? Why don't we? And why did they? Well, they thought that way because they're literally connecting, analogically connecting all the verbs, all the processes they see in nature. And they're seeing, in order for my maize to grow, I mean, there are other aspects of it. The corn cob has silk coming out of the husk, and they interpreted that as hair, and the cob itself was a head. So when you cut the cob off, you were taking a head. This was the head the deity gave you. You gave him a head. He gave you the reins and the corn cob, right? Again, they thought this way because through literally thousands of years, as they domesticated and grew maize, they analogized the celestial cycle, the seasonal cycle, the agricultural cycle into this is how it works. In order to keep it working, we got to give the gods sacrifices. So we're going to give it human sacrificial heads. So this is just another aspect of a really bizarre way of thinking that dominates the entire world. Now, my entire point then is, how does that thinking That thinking is there through the Book of Mormon timeline, right? That is there at Mosiah. I mean, we can prove that. So,
And it's there in
that is
South
what,
America, Central America, and North America.
yes, North, yes, South, Central, North.
Everywhere.
How, and that's what's running the society. That's their cosmovision. So not only are they running the agricultural society, but they're taking trophy heads to get the divine essence of the enemy and empower their political state, right? They're not looking for votes. It's not a democracy. They want as much sacred power by collecting it from the heads of their enemies, right? So the trophy head is built in the same cosmovision, and it dominates the religious cosmovision of every area. Now, clearly,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you're saying they're not concerned with infant baptism. That isn't a concern right now, right? I think that's what people need to realize. When you read the Book of Mormon and the things that they say that they're worried about, this has nothing to do with what the actual thought process in their cosmos was. They're not concerned with infant baptism.
Of course, I think the apologists would say here, well, yeah, that's what the Lamanites are doing, but the Nephites aren't.
Yeah, separate societies, so different thought patterns.
Understand that.
Perhaps.
So this is what I'm about to address that. But just on your point,
good.
Rebecca, the earliest proofs we have of human sacrifice are infants and children. Just so you're aware. In
I was being facetious. Just that this is nowhere in their cosmos.
No.
These religious practices, these concerns over the minutia of it, not at all.
So look, this is the thought world that dominates the Americas all through the Book of Mormon timeline. When we read the Book of Mormon, clearly that is a completely different thought world. So the apologists must argue that a civilization that's fully literate, that had millions of people, that had the Book of Mormon cosmovision, which is historical, monotheistic, deeply rooted in individual ethics, right? Sacred place is the individual with the divine, not a actual place that you have to pilgrimage to with the divine. In order for that, I mean, that existed, but it was all destroyed. That entire complex was so thoroughly destroyed that all we have left are the Lamanite structures. All I can say is history doesn't work that way. And when you detach yourself from the rules of history, I can make the Book of Mormon work 7 days a week, twice on Sundays.
Well, that'd be breaking the Sabbath, though, John.
Yeah, working too hard.
Look, history isn't linear or cyclical. It's fractal. We only have a few pieces of history, but every piece contains something we don't have, and all that we don't have is contained in the pieces that we do have. That's what a fractal is. So the Book of Mormon gives us a worldview, and we can look at that and say, well, this is what I have to find in order for this worldview to exist. So I have to go out there and I have to find writing, but I have to find Semitic alphabetic writing. The Mayan writing doesn't qualify. I need to find the kind of writing that they're doing. They're going to say, and they do, you're not going to find it because it was completely destroyed. Please know that when I make my arguments, I'm arguing from the evidence we do have, and the apologists are arguing from the evidence we don't have. And when you argue from the evidence we don't have, true enough, it is very hard to win that argument because there's always more evidence you don't have. and so repeatedly they say it's gone. We just haven't found it yet. So it's there, but it was all destroyed. So we don't have it. All we have is the text of the Book of Mormon. Well, I'm sorry, but the text of the Book of Mormon tells me that I must find thousands of ancient texts, alphabetic texts, producing the thought world of the Book of Mormon. That's not optional. And in 200 years ago, when the Book of Mormon was written, actually, we didn't know. You could you could say that 100 years ago, you could say that. But in 2023, if you're telling me we don't know where the Book of Mormon took place, it didn't. So this is the argument that they retract to. It's gone. We haven't found it yet, right? So this thought world of all this human sacrifice, that's what the Lamanites developed. Well, they developed it co-concurrent with the Nephites, because this was happening during the Nephite civilization. And the entire impetus of warfare in the Book of Mormon is the Lamanites want their inheritance back. Nephi took it from them, right? It's a Jacob Esau story, whereas the Lamanites really just want their heads to grow their maize, which is never mentioned, right? The Lamanites want their heads in order to empower their city-states. You know, the Nephites have an empire. It's a chief judge, centralized government run by texts, and all the cities have minor judges, right? This is the political system of the Book of Mormon, and they're interconnected. Mesoamerica never had that system. There was no empire in Mesoamerica. It was a confederate. Every city state was its own sacred place with its own king. Okay. So in the Book of Mormon, the Lamanites have a king that rule all the cities of the Lamanites. Well, in Mesoamerica, you have a confederacy of different kings running different cities who make alliances with each other. Okay. Where is they say, oh, the Lamanites did that. Well, I'm sorry, the Lamanite world in the Book of Mormon can't be tracked to the Mesoamerican world. Where's their kingship? Where's their writing? Because they had writing. They wrote one to another. They were taught out of the scriptures. Their leaders were Nephites that abandoned the Nephite system. Where's their writing? Where's their centralized government?
Well, and they came from the same family. They came from the same place with the same skill set. So
correct. Right. So they have only one argument. As far as I can tell, they have only one argument, and that is it's lost.
John, do you mind if I read out of the scriptures?
You bet. Read.
Oh, dear, Landon.
So this is exactly.
I like reading the scriptures.
Yeah, this is exactly the argument that they'll go to. Mormon chapter 9, verse 32. And now behold, we have written this record according to our knowledge, and the characters which are called among us the reformed Egyptian, being handed down and altered by us according to our manner of speech. And if our plates had been sufficiently large, we should have written in Hebrew, but the Hebrew hath been altered by us also. And if we could have written in Hebrew, behold, ye would have had no imperfections in our record. But the Lord knoweth the things which we have written, and also that none other people knoweth our language. And because that none other people knoweth our language, therefore he hath prepared means for the interpretation thereof. So they're going to say it was lost. The text says it was lost. The text predicts this. And
only one person can translate.
Yes, only one person can translate it, and God has prepared that person. What are your thoughts on that?
They're going to say that Adam wrote a book and taught his children to read or write, because that's what the Pearl of Great Price says, and it's wrong. That's Moroni chapter 9, right? That's the very end.
Mormon chapter 9, I think.
Yeah. Is it Mormon or Moroni?
Mormon chapter 9.
Mormon chapter 9. So this is the very end of the civilization where, by the way, tens of millions of people are killing each other, right? So what's that tell you? If you have tens of millions of people, you have a highly urbanized civilization that's entirely agricultural, because you have to feed all those people, that is completely intermeshed with trade, because you have to arm all those people. Where's those tens of millions of swords and spears coming from? Armor, right? So that alone gives us an imprint of that kind of civilization. So, and they have Hebrew and Reformed Egyptian, right? They have Hebrew and Reformed Egyptian, but no other people know their language. What other people are they talking about? We already established the Lamanites came from the Nephites. Their kings are Nephite dissenters. They have the alphabetic script that the Nephites are using. If the Nephites just have a royal caste, let's say less than 5% of the civilization is reading and writing in their alphabetic script. Well, that's the royal caste. And part of those people defect to the Lamanites. So they bring that with them, right? And by the way, if you have a kingship of an empire, unless you're the Inca using textile quipu knots, you need writing, right? And so they're taking the same if you follow the logic of the text, they're taking the same writing and the same culture into the Lamanite culture. And so when Mormon says, no people know our language, this is at the very Book of Mormon, end of the Book of Mormon, and it's a setup that Joseph Smith is writing because only he knows the language. No one else, actually no one, not the Nephites or the Lamanites or any of the scribes, any of the scholars, not Campbellites, not the, no one knows the language except Joseph Smith. This is a setup. So again, that's what's actually happening. But sure enough, the apologists can say, no other people knew it. Well, that's not true to history. If your entire civilization is being run by text, we're going to find them. And if we don't find them, you're arguing from the absence of evidence, not from the evidence we have. And, I can't argue from the absence of evidence for too long. Again, it's a fully literate world. It's not emerging from Mesoamerica in this time period. That's 400 CE. 400 CE. We should be finding tens of thousands of texts running a Nephite monotheistic civilization. And even so another argument. Okay, let's say all the texts are gone. Well, how about the art?
Exactly.
How about show me your monotheistic, it's God who died on a cross. I mean, they know this. Where's the God of the cross in your art, painted on every temple and palace? Again, Lan and Rebecca, there's always another backflip to do. So there's never an end to the argument for the apologetics. I'm just saying this makes no rational sense.
Yeah, we're gonna go over the multiverse argument and
yes.
the
Well, and
Ethiopian
again, I think
model that the Book of Mormon happened in Ethiopia. Some of the other things we've heard.
Yeah, that's right.
The Nephite multiverse.
I actually
Anything
believe
can happen.
I actually believe that's an answer, a different realm, sort of like the
different
spirit world that
timeline.
explains. It's string theory. I actually think that might be where people are going. And again, I think we need to stress, although we're talking about Mesoamerica now, we're talking nowhere, not heartland, nowhere is what we're talking. Because I know some people were a little confused on what we were saying before, that because we were speaking so much of Mesoamerica, which is the only place, if it could have happened, it would have, didn't. But we're also talking all encompassing.
All encompassing. All the Americas.
All the Americas.
Hey guys, I made my first meme. I am such an old fuddy-duddy, but your Trexmos have inspired me.
Oh, yes.
So this is my first meme. Thou fool, thou shalt say an anachronism. We've got an anachronism. We need no more anachronism. Have you attained an anachronism, save it were by the Mormon prophets? Look, the iPhone to Abraham Lincoln is equivalent to the Book of Mormon to the Mayan. It's the same. It's a technology and a thinking system completely out of time and place. And so the Mesoamerican model is as problematic as the Heartland model. You're not going to find it in South America either. Nowhere in the Americas. You really do have to go to Ethiopia. You might look. 0% of archaeology has been done in Antarctica. So you might find Nephite civilization in Antarctica amongst the emperor penguins and the polar bear kings of the ice slave mines.
Under the ice, because I was taught by my parents that the lost 10 tribes were under the ice.
That's right. The lost.
Yeah, that's what I was taught.
I don't mean to be too smarmy, but no. Literally, the thought worlds are cannot be produced, are not produced in the Americas. So you have to say they're lost with no influence on the surrounding cultures, right? There's no remnant. Not only are we not looking, we're looking for material archaeology, but also cultural archaeology. The ideas of Nephite civilization, the ideas of sacred place being the individual, right? Your individual commune with God in an act of divine grace, where the God is the only sacrifice necessary. Those ideas have no influence on the surrounding cultures, and there's no material evidence in the surrounding cultures. Everything has to be purged. Well, again, in the old world, I just, we kind of went over the slow evolution that occurs, but it doesn't occur backwards. I mean, it's occurring through the information medium. So as alphabetic texts are written, and as the Jews are politically dispossessed, a new form of religiosity slowly emerges through their cultural, political, and information system. And they're not going back to the pyramid texts. They've developed a textual religion that is dispossessed from place. The Book of Mormon religion is that religion because it's not rooted in place, it's rooted in individual, the individual's repentance with Jesus. So we have to think this is not only purged, but all the influence, all the thought structures that an alphabetic text would have created and influenced are retrofitted back into secondary orality. I mean, the culture, the material, archaeology, it all has to be shifted. So it's not how history works, and it's not what the Book of Mormon predicts. So but that is their last argument. Look, it's gone. So, but it was there. I'm just saying no. All right. Any last questions? Because I'm done.
Yep.
Are you done? That's incredible.
We do want to point out that we did this episode to answer a lot of the questions that were raised from the first episode.
Yes.
We are still going to cover your last 3 points in a future episode, but like a good professor, he wanted to answer the questions before he moved to the next ideas. And that's why we did this episode.
Yeah. And we had a lot of comments. We had a lot of great comments, from apologists too, just back and forth. And that's the thing, the dialogue and the discussion, we're not afraid of that at all. It's important. Go ahead, comment, tell us what you're thinking. Were you ever able to figure out that picture, Landon? My favorite picture.
Yep.
Okay. I just need to show this because this is some family members of mine favorite picture. But, it's a picture of what I believe most people think the Book of Mormon world was like. And this is a picture of Mormon abridging the plates. Little tiny Moroni is playing under the desk. But, I mean, what do you see in this picture, John?
Remember your comment, Rebecca, that writing takes an entire ecosystem of technology to produce. Look at that image. That is what is necessary. Mormon and Moroni are compiling the plates off of a library of records. Tell me the ecosystem that must be created in order for that for this picture to exist. What else needs to exist?
Rome, I think.
Right.
Something like unto Rome with the
That's right.
For those of you who are listening, it's a room. It's almost like a cave. There are stairs. There's the sort of Laban. There's steel shields. There's shelves of books and scrolls. There's a carpet. I mean, it's this very cozy literary scene that is not rooted at all in reality. But I believe a lot of people think this is exactly what it was like, but impossible.
Well, again, Mayan codexes were synonymous with temple walls, and they were filled with rituals.
Yeah.
So you did have a Mayan priest sitting down at a table painting a ritual.
Well, maybe
Uh,
you need to design a painting like this, John, that shows what it actually would really have looked like. I don't
I
know,
think that's
but I
actually
understand.
a pen in his hand, isn't it? Isn't
Yeah,
he?
it is a pen. It's a lighted pen. No, and I understand the appeal of the scene, I mean, it is. It gives you chills if this is what you believe, but none of this is rooted in reality. So, and I think that's what we're trying to explain through talking to John. So, do you have any final statements or thoughts, Landon or John? And then we will let our viewers go to sort of digest this. I know when we talk to people at Sunstone, they're like, I watched it twice, the first episode. I had to stop and think about it, which is exactly right. These concepts are very overarching, they're complex, but once you start to understand what John was talking about, it's a whole new world of the way that you're looking at the text of the Book of Mormon.
well, it is complex. It's different. It's different.
It's different.
So how many people are going to enjoy this? I have no idea. I'm shocked that people, but this is, I'm just applying this learning to the Book of Mormon and showing that it just doesn't fit. History doesn't fit. The Book of Mormon doesn't fit history. I mean, existentially, every page, it doesn't fit. So, anyway, that's my comment.
That's your comment. Do you want to give us a little preview on what our next one? You said you were going to go through your next points, or do you want to save that because we are having John back, everybody?
So look, thank you. I had 5 theses. The next one
Yes.
is the text of the Book of Mormon can be derived from the description of the gold plates, and the characters we get from the scribes of the Book of Mormon can be falsified. So so now I'm leaving this entire discussion, and I'm going to a lot of this has been talked about. When I first started to deconstruct this, I didn't know it had been talked about. One of the things I did was just, I can learn something about Reformed Egyptian if I just figure out how much space and how many words, and that'll tell me what kind of writing system it was. So I'm going to go over that. But having said that, I do have a few new ideas that I haven't seen anywhere else embedded in this conversation. So we're going to go over the plates, the writing, and what would be required for the plates to get created, and what kind of writing system would be needed in order to write the text of the Book of Mormon on the plates. And it turns out, like the archaeology of the Book of Mormon, it's impossible. 99% improbable. One guy said, don't say impossible. You can't speak of certitudes in history. And you know what? He's right. That's 99% improbable that any of this happened. The apologists can live in the 1% cracks, but that's the same 1% where people believe the aliens built the pyramids and Bigfoot is a trans-dimensional Sasquatch driving a spaceship over the North Pole. So that also is possible.
It is possible. I kind of believe some of those things you just mentioned. I was raised by conspiracy theorists, so sometimes my mind goes there. I'm like,
I'm a huge Bigfoot fan.
Sounds really cool.
I'm a huge Bigfoot fan.
I know. No, I am too. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so yep, I am too. I still think, he's awesome.
I believe in Bigfoot.
Yep. Here you go. Now we've lost all credibility once we said that. So go ahead, comment, tell us that we believe in Bigfoot, and we're way off. Now we've done it. We've done it. Landon, do you have any final comments?
No, thanks, John. Just for clearing this up, because so many questions, and I get to just stand there and say, we'll ask Dr. Lundwall.
Yeah, we defer to Dr. Lundwall. That's exactly right. So as we said again, this is sort of our second part, the first episode where we really introduce all of this. You can look for that and then watch this as a follow-up. And then, as we just learned, we're going to have Dr. Lundwall on again to delve into some more issues like this, and it's just absolutely fascinating. I hope you are all enjoying it like we are. We feel like we're just almost in another dimension of learning. It's so wonderful, and we're so thankful for Dr. Lundwall to come and talk to us. So anyway, like and subscribe. If you guys would like to be notified when new episodes come out, go ahead and hit that notification bell. And you can always financially help support Mormonish if you'd like. We have links to PayPal and Venmo in the show notes description. And we just again would like to say we appreciate all of our viewers and listeners, and especially everybody that came up and talked to us at Sunstone. It was just really fun to meet a lot of you in person. John got the chance to meet a lot of people, and it's just really fun to put faces. You know, we talk to you guys and we feel like we know you guys, and now we actually do know a lot more of you. So we appreciate you a lot, and we'll say goodbye for now from Mormonish. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.